Each week I've been observing just how heartening it is to see people back in our sanctuary. We also have a service outdoors in person. We are welcoming people back. As you can see, we are maintaining appropriate protocols and also doing our best to encourage people to feel comfortable back in what we hope is an extension of your home, all of our homes. So I'm saying this to those who are present and to those who are joining us virtually. Please come back when you are comfortable, and we'll be so happy to welcome you here. I want to just tell a little story about my high school reunion, which happened a bunch of years ago. And if you're like me, you approach a high school reunion with some mixed feelings. There are some people that you really want to see. And forgive me for saying, there are some people that if you don't see them, that would be okay too. So there was this one particular person who, when I was in high school, was kind of arrogant, went to a great college, didn't hesitate to tell everyone about it, kind of looked down his nose on people who were not as capable as he was. And I said to myself, I don't really want to run into this guy. So I went to the reunion. I was hanging out with the friends that I had arranged to go with so that I would have someone to talk to in case I ran into this guy. And sure enough, there he was. And you know how you can't really pretend you don't see the person and they can't pretend that they don't see you. So we started talking. And it turns out that he is living upstate, that he's working as a physician. And he was telling me about his children, and one of his children has special needs. And he was describing how through the eyes of this child, he has been able to understand how difficult it is for certain people, that for other people, things might be easy. And he actually has become an advocate for reaching out to those who have certain challenges and helping them to feel more capable, giving them the tools to succeed. So talking to him, I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what a change. And what I want us to think about this morning is that sometimes stories change. We are often surprised, and there may even be a part of us that doesn't want the story to change. Because frankly, if he had still been the same person that I found arrogant, it would have been easier for me. I could have left thinking, hey, look at this guy. He's still, whatever he is. And I had to actually change my perception of him. And it also caused me to look at certain things differently. Although I have to say that I owe him gratitude for the idea for this sermon. And I'm going to let him know at the earliest possible time. Ladies and gentlemen, stories can change. The Torah itself describes how stories can change. You're sitting in Mesopotamia, your name is Abram and Sarai, and you hear a voice that tells you to move to a different place, which you do. And you start that journey and your story changes. You are enslaved, and everyone you know is enslaved. And then you discover that that's not going to last forever, that you are actually going to experience your freedom. And getting used to that is not so easy. Even a positive story change is not always so easy for us to get used to. In this morning's Torah portion, God says to the children of Israel, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz u'shechavtem ve'ein machrid." I'll give you peace in the land, and you're going to lie down untroubled by anyone. And then God says, I'll be your God, you'll be my people. I'm the God who brought you out of the lands of Egyptians. And I was the one who made it so that you would be slaves no more. Now, why is God going backwards before going forwards? Why the slavery before the ultimate peace? Because God is saying, I believe, you didn't think that story would change. You didn't think that you would ever go from a space of slavery to a space of freedom. And now you might think this story of your oppression will never change and you'll never have peace. That one changed, and this one will change as well. We hold on to the old stories. We all do, even the painful ones, the people in our families that we might have challenges with. In a way, it's easier to maintain those challenges because who wants to have to reorient? Sometimes we can feel really good if we're in a situation where we think the other person is challenging. If that person makes a change, if the story starts to change, we have to start all over again. And that's really very difficult. However, I am here to say to us this morning that our tradition wants us to recognize that stories can change, and the changing stories of others are an impetus to growth for ourselves. A few days ago, I heard a scholar from the Hartman Institute speaking about an update of what's going on in Israel. This is somebody who has been at the table of negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians for years. This is somebody who has the closest sense of anyone of some of the complexities that exist in this very charged and very challenging international relationship. He spoke about the elections in Israel. He said they are frustrating. Maybe there's going to be yet another election. He also spoke about many Israelis' views on the possible reestablishment of the nuclear agreements with Iran, which was fascinating. And he said Israelis want the United States to get more assurances and to give less. They understand that there will likely be a reestablishment of the treaty. They want to make sure that the United States gets as much as possible without giving away too much. And then the moderator asked him, is there anything positive? What gives you hope in terms of what's going on with Israel and her neighbors? And he spoke about the normalization with the Gulf countries, UAE and Bahrain, and with Morocco. And he said that this is starting to tell a different story. So that piqued my interest, starting to tell a different story. Because Israelis have always said, Esau hates Jacob. Our neighbors hate us. That is the story. And they've had plenty of evidence to support that story. But what this individual, who has every reason not to trust that the story can change, what he believes is that we're starting to see a different story. We are starting to see in some of these nations a desire to have a comfortable relationship with Israel. And when he wrote a paragraph to try to memorialize some of the understanding of this for a particular context, he started by referring to the Jewish narrative, the Jewish state. And he said there was no pushback. In the past, there had been enormous pushback. You can't say Jewish state. You can't say Jewish narrative. He said he is starting to notice that the story is beginning to change. And he said the beginning of growth is when our story is challenged. So I want to leave that for us to think about in our personal lives, in our connections with family and friends. Are there times when it looks like the story might change, when something is thawing a little bit, when something is not going to be quite the way it was, and then what do? Do we resist it because the old uncomfortable, the old difficult story is more comfortable than the possibility of having to change? Or are we open to the kinds of growth that can embrace a new story? And we should be thinking about that nationally and internationally as well. The arrogant person from high school can become more open, more sensitive, more decent. The alienation that we feel today doesn't have to last forever. Today's enemies may not remain our enemies forever. We have to keep our eyes open for sure, but we can leave a part of ourselves that is open to the possibility of a new story. I want to conclude by paraphrasing the rousing passage from the Passover Seder. We sing, V'nomar lefanav shira chadasha. We will sing before you a new song. So as we continue to journey from Egypt to Sinai with the Passover Seder, a more and more distant memory, I want to paraphrase that. Let us learn to sing a new song, and let us be open to considering a new story. Shabbat Shalom.